Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mortgage Heroes Weekly Podcast. I'm Andy.
I'm Brian.
And today we're going to talk about 4 more industry topics. I am starting to see a certain trend happen. We're talking about the younger generation. We're talking about home prices a lot. We're talking about rates a lot, inflation, affordability. We have more of that today, but a new twist in some of these numbers, even right out the gate from the top article today. You have from Realtor.com, brace yourselves, the price per square foot on average, U.S. home has jumped more than 50% since 2019. Jeez. This is a startling number. Now, this kind of correlates to a lot of other things that have been happening with interest rates being in the absolute lowest of the lows ever during 2020 and 21 and kind of a little bit in 22. Last week, we talked about the generational mortgage rates and who has the lowest mortgage rates, and that was our millennials and our Gen Zers. So that was interesting. And now here we are with price per square foot jumping more than 50% in the last 4.5 years. This is bad news. So what do you want to talk about first when it comes to this?
So, just right off the bat, you see San Diego, although it's, not the highest percentage in growth for median list price growth for the square foot, but the median house is over $1 million.
It was number 5.
It was number 5. But
on this list, San Diego's number 5. In the entire country, okay? This is everywhere. Every single city. It's number 5. Number 5.
I just, I remember when, years back, you look at, $1 million homes and you're like, oh, wow, that's a $1 million house. And then now you look at $1 million homes and you're like, that's $1 million.
That's a $500,000 home. Oh.
No, it is. And a lot of the houses aren't like, you're not getting a huge house. You're not getting this piece of land, new upgrades. It's a home.
$1 million house used to be like the roundabout drive with like a fountain in the front and a gate.
That's what you would expect, right?
Shrubs and bushes.
Not anymore.
It's what am I saying? Encapsulating the entire property.
Nope. Now you get just a regular 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot.
No, come on, be
I
real.
promise. I can find those in San Diego.
I know you can't in San Diego. I know. Around where we're at, like Rolling Hills has some 4-bedroom places. Okay, not 2-bedroom loft condos downtown deal. I understand what you're getting at, but the point is, in general, it's San Diego as a city. Like the city of San Diego is number 5 on this list with a 65.7% growth in price per square foot in the last 5 years. That is astronomical. And every list or every one of the cities on the top 10, look at the lowest number, Brian. It's 57.7.
It's still
growth, which was Phoenix, and shared by Hartford, Connecticut at 57.7. Everything is above 57.7. So this whole average of more than 50% is absolutely ludicrous.
No, it's ridiculous. And you just start to think in those last couple, since 2019, has the increase of your wage gone, along with this type of increases, because you also see it in other places like rent, you see it everywhere else, and those that your income doesn't. It's gone up, but it hasn't gone up to the point where it's like, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. We could take on this new levels of square footage or just pricing and anything.
It's the spillover, right? So whether you own the house or you're renting the house or you own the condo, townhome, or you're the renter there, it's spillover. So this price per square foot going up so astronomically so quickly is obviously a contributing factor to the housing affordability problem we've been talking about for a long time. One of the pieces that I wanted to make sure I kind of make a pit stop at for this article specifically is that over the same period of time, in contrast, the typical listed home price increased by 37. I almost said only 37.5. It increased by 37.5 over the same period of time. So that has now brought our nationwide median home price to $442,500, and it was definitely not that high 5 years ago.
It's like 200.
So yes, you see that the average square foot is outpacing the home price growth rate at the same time. There is a caveat to this, and this was pointed out by one of the people surveyed, or one of the people who was talking about this was that sometimes smaller square foot homes can have a higher price per square foot compared to a larger home. It can kind of skew the numbers. It would also, in order for that to be true, kind of across the board, you would see a much. It would statistically have a much different outcome than this 50%. It would look a lot different. That would be like you also see a ton of those types of homes hitting the market and a lot less of the standard, let's say, middle America type home. Like a regular single family residence that's got a couple bedrooms and a couple bathrooms and a front yard, backyard, garage. It's broadly that people were buying over the last 5 years as well. So I understand the the variable that's being asked to be considered. The same person was also saying that, you have to look at the comps as far as like the condition of the home, upgrades, the lot size, its location. So it's not just that the house itself. Like I was looking at a house with a friend the other day. It's like 76 acres in Texas.
My God.
And the house is 1,150,000, I think. So 1.1. And the house is like 3,700 square feet. Now that price per square foot is going to be really high, but it's also a 70-acre lot
Property, yeah.
that comes with it, and it has a barn, and it has all this other stuff that gets mixed in with the evaluation of the property too.
It's actually a really good price.
You know what I'm saying? Hey, what's the address of that house?
Yeah, I'm like 1.176 acres, 37 square foot home.
37 square foot home. Yeah, it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful place.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm like, dude.
Yeah, but even then, like okay, fine. That place was, let's say, if you were to use the average, 37% cheaper 5 years ago, as well.
Even a better deal,
or half the price per square foot just 5
Jesus.
years ago. So the point about this being so astronomically like quickening is that all of these cities have like runaway growth of price per square foot.
Yeah.
That leaves a lot of people chasing it from behind and also losing ground.
Yeah.
So I would like to really quickly just list the top 10. We have in number one place, New York at 84.7%, Boston, Massachusetts, 72.9%, Nashville, Tennessee, 68.6%, Tampa, Florida, 68%,
San Diego, 65.7%.
65.7%, Austin, Texas, 64.7%, Memphis, Tennessee, 64.2%, Riverside, so another California on the list, at 62.7%, Hartford, Connecticut, 57.7%, and Phoenix, Arizona, 57.7%. Quick note about Riverside. Riverside is one of those areas where if you can't afford in the neighboring county, you can look in Riverside. And that's one of those places that it is a little bit more affordable. Even when you look at this chart, San Diego, which is a relatively good distance from Riverside, there's a huge disparity between the median list price. San Diego's is $1,072,000, Riverside $620,000. So it's not exactly half, but it's kind of close to that.
Pretty close.
It's pretty darn close to that.
Yeah.
So all top 10 are 57.7% or higher in median list price growth per square foot. I understand that it could be deceiving. You have areas that are extremely astronomically high, but final thought on this for me is that the markets that they cited that had the lowest return on price per square foot were still all above 20% growth rate speed, right? Or not growth rate. So you had Detroit at 23.2, Baltimore 24.8, and San Jose 26.3.
Like they need to grow more.
So if you're saying that the markets that saw the lowest return on price per square foot were still 23, 24, and 26, then it's no big surprise that the average is 50%.
That's ridiculous.
Isn't that nuts? And this is from what Realtor.com. So cite your sources, double check it if you want, but. Again, we rely on sources like CoreLogic and Altus Research and all that. So they're pulling from listing data, closing data, price per square foot that is listed on MLSs, and this is obviously something that's probably going to maintain its course. I don't think this same rate will proceed in perpetuity. I think it will have to have a cooling off and a leveling off, but I don't think the time frame is known because there's too many unknown variables.
External factors, yeah.
From CNBC, we have investor home purchases jump for the first time in 2 years. Here's what that means for buyers. Real estate investor activity jumped 0.5% from a year ago, according to Redfin, and it's the first increase in activity since mid-2022. Interesting part to me is because around the mid-2022 is when you started seeing the impact of interest rates by the Fed being, they started increasing their Fed funds rate in March of 2022. And it's hard for me to identify whether it is what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, is it that investors buying up the places has driven this median home price per square foot that we were just talking about in the previous segment of the show,
right?
Or is it that it's everyone buying in, and then investors are like, okay, well, people are clearly have an appetite for having shelter in this form or fashion, so we're in now too. What do you think it is?
I think it's that the appetite is still there, and whenever regular people go out and buy houses, they're still not, some of them need work, some of them are outdated, and people are still trying to buy these houses and get in. Now the opportunity for the investor is that I can get the house, get it at a discounted price because we know how to negotiate the deal, whatnot, but they're able to then put it back on the market, somebody who likes that house and they want to buy it at that price because the house is worth for whatever, they think is an affordable, purchase for them. But I think that they lead the way, and then people have more inventory to be able to then go out and purchase. And the other way around is like, there's just a plethora of other houses that need work, and not everybody has that money to be able to put that in. So when investors buy a house, I think it facilitates, regular people buying because the house is already ramped up. And
do you think that's a large percentage of it, though? Do you think that's a majority of the investment homes that are being bought is because it needs a lot of work? Or it's just that there's people that have the cash access or the hard money line to go buy them and just buy them up, and then that's what's happening? What do you think
I wouldn't say like, hey, every investor's like, hey, I'm making the neighborhood good and I'm going to clean it up. It's obviously for a profit. So I think if they're able to, make enough profit, whether they flip the house, they get what they want, they're still putting out a better house out in that neighborhood. So I think that it helps them out either way.
So already this year in the first quarter, real estate investors purchased about 44,000 homes. That's so at that same pace, if you annualize that, that's 176,000 homes. Now in a year where we normally have about 4 million homes change hands, you look at that number, you're like, oh, that's not a lot. Let me ask you a question. What would 176,000 more families look like owning those homes? 176,000.
That's still significantly
a lot.
Yeah.
That's like your family owns one. I have one, and then there's still 175,998 people who are going to do it too.
And I think a lot of people probably think like, oh, investors are buying out everything, but there's only a certain amount of investors, right? And there's only a certain amount of people that are buying that much. So there's a lot more regular people out there that are looking to buy a house than there is investors looking to buy. Like, yeah, do they buy in bulk and in large quantities? They do, but there's still so many people in this world, in this country, that want to buy a house, that have the opportunity to buy a house. So yeah, it's only a small fraction of of the purchases. The sales and the buys throughout the year, but it is significant enough for people to be able, like, if you have somebody in a neighborhood that's flipping houses that just focuses in that area, you can guarantee that you're going to have a nice house that's coming up in the market every so often when people sell. That neighborhood, that house that nobody ever did anything to it. Eventually, they got to sell, they got to move, or something's going to happen, and someone's going to buy that property, whether they kept it up or not. It's another opportunity for somebody to come in and say, hey, I get to make money off of it, and then B, I get to provide a really nice house for somebody that wants to come into this neighborhood.
Yeah, and I understand there's a role for investors to play, especially because people who maybe can't afford, or they don't qualify, or maybe their credit's bad, or there's a reason why they can't get into home ownership, right, that they still need to have a roof over the head and they have to rent a place.
Yeah.
But one of the notes I brought up I wanted to talk to you about today is that we've talked about this, though, is the amount of investor-owned properties being substantial enough to be noteworthy of discussing even is it's important. It's really important because we've talked about, if you sit on your hands and you wait on the sidelines and you're waiting for this market crash to come around, the investors are not. Yes. And so if I'm sitting here with you right now and this report is saying 44,000 homes in the first quarter were bought by investors, that's 44,000 homes that did not go to someone who's sitting on their hands or waiting for a collapse or whatever the issue is that you're waiting for. I'm not talking about you can't qualify and you can't actually get into a home. I'm talking about if you can and you're being outgunned by these guys. This is part of the consequence of having that FOMO, not FOMO, but the fear of taking action, not right. FOMO, not fear of missing out, fear of taking action, because we said people are going to gobble up inventory. If you wait for 10% drop, 15, 20%, someone's going to undercut you and go, oh, it's at a 5% drop or a 7% drop. You know what? That's good enough for me. I'm in. And now an investor owns it and you don't.
And that's that's why I encourage, a lot of our audience or, clients and anybody looking to buy a house to embody that investor mentality where they stay ready. They're constantly looking for deals. They're constantly on the prowl. They're constantly, looking for when that next deal is going to come out. And similar to you, if you're buying just your regular house, you have to be proactive. Before you could sit a while, wait for a house to come up on the market. But now you have to be literally like, you have to go in groups. You have to be working your network. You yourself also have the responsibility to be seeing where you can find a good deal as well. And I think it comes at a price that if you're just, hopefully waiting that deal's going to come and the realtor is going to find it, sometimes it will happen, but it takes a lot longer than if you were proactive, you're searching, and you start looking at properties through a lens of like, well, hey, if this isn't the property that I can get into right now that I want, well, how can this still help me to get through to the next step? And I think that's where people, really put in that emotional lens to it where they're like, I don't want to buy that house because I'm going to be in here for 20, 30 years. When in reality, it's like you're just utilizing this for the next 5 years. You hedge against, the rise of living right now. You secure a payment that you're able to make. And then once things start to shift, you're in a way better position. You have a lot more of a foundation to be able to then make that jump to that next property, start a business with the earnings of, the salary property, or you just have more options financially to be able to have a more stable life once you have a property. And I've noticed that in young buyers as well, where they, bought 2 years ago and now they're looking to either sell or take out money from their property. And they're like, I have thousands of dollars in my house. Like, how can I utilize this? And I think that's something that, also comes with the gift of being able to own a house, that you have a lot more options when it comes down to it.
Yeah. And, the thing that is also noteworthy in this is that, in describing what a real estate investor means in the housing classical definition, this number and these figures we're talking about are investor purchases that are reflected by the purchaser being a limited liability company, LLC, short for that, or another form of company or a trust, and they're buying it for the purpose of income. But what's not mentioned in here? The mom and pop buyer. The people that we know that they're buying it themselves, they're buying one or two. How many tens of thousands of people have done that this year already that are not counted in this number? So as we're sitting here saying, 44,000 homes this year have already been bought by investors, and that's on pace for 176,000. That does not include the private people, private citizens out here that are not doing it in a corporate structure, buying a place that they're using for a rental investment purpose.
And you notice that, a lot of the people start with their primary house and then they turn that into an investment property.
Right.
So it's like there's a lot more, I would say, hidden investors out there. But I guess by definition, if you bought it under LLC trust and it's for profit, then you're an investor. But there's plenty of mom and pop shops that own multiple houses.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be 100, but I know a few like regular people that own like 10, 15 houses.
Mm-hmm.
And and they all bought those slowly, little by little, accumulating through regular loans and stuff like that. And I noticed that if you buy it for your primary purpose, it doesn't go down as an investor. But if you then turn around after a year and turn it into an investment, it is still an investment.
Right, and unfortunately, this is kind of a more nuanced measurement because it's purchases that are made. And at the time of purchase, the purchaser is already a LLC.
Yeah.
The people you're talking about that like you own your house, I own my house, and then we move and then we turn that one into a rental. That's not in this figure.
No.
And so there's someone in this article is quoted like there's not much evidence that there's crowding out of homebuyers from the market. I'm like, well, yeah, there kind of is because you're arguing the statistic. You're saying, oh well. 20% of the people, 20% of people that are buying are investors, and 80% are homeowners. Well, that's fine, but that's by this definition.
Yeah.
What if it's 25% are investors or 30% are investors?
Because if you start counting, like if it converts from your primary to your secondary to your investment on your
Right.
title, then automatically doesn't that turn into an investment? It should be looped into like now an investment property.
Well, right, and then there's the hybrid where you live in it and then you convert something. We talk a lot about ADUs here. You build an ADU that is on your lot that is not connected to your house. You do a garage conversion. You do a build up. I mean, there's all other types of ways where the home itself could be your primary residence, but also have an investment part to it. And in that case, and that's not an LLC either. So I think there's kind of there's like the main definition number we're talking about here, but there's also a veiled kind of semi-unknown total of actually how many properties and how many people have some rental part of their place that is generating income for them. And that trend is changing very quickly among people who have a lot of equity, a lot of space, or they're younger and they're looking for their home to pull some weight on the monthly cost.
So just in these last couple of weeks, I mean, not weeks, like years since, this ADU gold rush has come about, a lot of the buyers and people that I speak to are already looking for properties that they can do this too. So they're looking for bigger lots, they're looking for areas that are zoning to be able to build multi-unit properties. And that's something that I do see as a trend where people are looking like, hey, if I'm going to buy this house, how much can I actually make money off this house to be able to pay for my expenses? And it also comes at I think a very smart decision, because now you're leveraging an asset that you're going to be living in it, but it's also going to carry its weight if you're able to set yourself up in that right way, where it helps cover that expense a month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had a little bit of a map on this article, nice. And I kind of drawing on the map because there's a defined area where it's the title is U.S. metros with highest rates of investor home purchases, and broadly it's everything that's west of New Mexico and south of San Francisco. or east of Texas and south of Kentucky. So
like nobody wants to live
yeah,
in
look,
these areas.
like the Midwest has like this huge gap section, and then everything like below below Kentucky and the San Francisco like line going left to right on your map, it is everything's below that. So I think there's something to that as far as the amount, like the dollar. Also maybe the opportunity to buy more investment properties in those areas. But what was again kind of surprising is there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the dots on the map are in California, where you have
And they're all in a darker range of blue.
and they're all along the coastline. So if you look at where they're all kind of clustered, they're all on the coastline. They're up and down the coast. So it looks like it's from L.A. Well, maybe L.A. Santa Barbara area up north.
Yeah,
and
Coast.
there's a handful of them. And then there's like these other dots that are kind of like scattered around all these other states in the southeast. So it's like California is crazy expensive by one hand. On the other, people want to live here. They're willing to do what it takes to stay here or to have that lifestyle, whatever the personal reason is. Investors are seeing the same thing. Like, well, fine, we'll just buy places then. And in some of these areas, you see that there's a higher percentage of purchases by investors than there are than across the country.
Yeah, and it's crazy because prices only continue to go up, and it's just like anything. You see people buy designer or brand things for that matter. It doesn't matter what the price is to them. If they really want it, they're gonna do whatever it takes for them to be able to get it if it's within their means.
Yeah,
and that's the same thing that I see with houses. I mean, there's the people that no, I'm never gonna buy. I'm never gonna be too expensive. Okay, you might not, but then there's people that are like, that's fine with me.
Yeah,
it is what it is. I gotta get it. I want it.
It's that cash flow thing again. It's like the price tag may be the price tag that one time you buy it, but if you're going to be able to rent it for more than what it's costing you every month to operate it, then that's clearly what this is representing here for people who are investing in buying properties, and especially if they're doing, I'll say, corporate real estate purchases, where it's like it's a group or it's a LLC or a organization that's buying them. It's clearly a play for obtaining as many as possible. Like off camera, we call it the hungry hippo strategy. Get as much of the market as you can, but then also holding it for the long haul, because the prices will continue to increase. Now, we have had some naysayers, and I understand where this is coming from. So give me a second here. We have had some naysayers like, prices just can't continue to go up forever. Remember the great financial crisis of 2008? Yeah, of course I do. We had a front row seat to it. We lived through it every single GD day. But here's the difference. We had a lot of unqualified people that were qualifying to get homes, which was pushing up prices that was not backed by their actual ability to pay back. That is part of the problem. I'm not going to let the banks off the hook. I'm not going to let the Federal Reserves off the hook. I'm not going to let the International Monetary Funds and all those people off the hook. Definitely going to let the politicians off the hook. But the truth is that like wicked tornado and torrent of variables that all led to that collapse, of the global financial collapse of 2008, 2009, was you go all the way upstream, and the banks allowed for people to be qualified that actually couldn't make payments at the end of the day. That is different than right now, because the qualification standards, the type of loans, number one, number two, the standards of underwriting, the qualification steps that the bank's going for, and also you have that on the regulatory side, there's not a tolerance for the type of nonsense that happened back then. Complete rules and policies have changed because of that. And again, I probably sound like I'm defending all that. My argument here is that if you're saying, oh, well, Brian's mentioning prices are going to go up forever and rent's going to go up forever, it's like, okay, well, you can go look at a chart for the last 50 years and then go point out the argument where we're wrong there. You can't make that argument in the last 3 years, 5 years. Oh, it's going to crash. It's going to soften. Okay, fine. But then you're also saying that you have a crystal ball that says which variable is going to fall first, which shoe is going to drop first, which leg from the table is going to get pulled first, and then maybe that could turn out to be true. But the global financial crisis compared to now, I don't think people should be holding their breath on prices dropping.
You've been holding your breath for a long time.
No, it's a long thought. I know it's a long thought. Someone's going to be like, God, I go to forever. There's a long thought out there. Well, thanks for listening.
Some people probably just, at this point, they're too far in. They want it to happen because, they can't be wrong.
I look, and I'm not going to say that it can't happen. I'm just saying that the way things have changed over the last 15 years since then is such that the percentage of probability that is going to all out collapse like it did and have 45, 50% price cuts on real estate, because it was actually correcting the market of where it actually should have been based on actual qualification. That's the problem. And because the market is taking care of that I don't think is the impending doom and threat at this time. Okay. We need to move on.
Yeah.
Calm down. Everyone calm down. Everyone means me. Calm down.
Hey, you good?
Okay. Every once in a while, we have an article from Zero Hedge. They do lean a little bit one direction when it comes to economics and capitalism and things like that. I wanted to bring this article to the table today because they are basically laying out the case that renters and owners live in separate economies. Most of this I completely see firsthand. Most of this we see when we talk to people here. Most of this we will see when we go through our neighborhoods and our communities here in San Diego. I cannot sit here and attest that this is true in all places of the country. But I can say, in general, broad brushstroke, I agree with the sentiment. Let's get into the reasons why. Okay? So it turns out the renters and homeowners are living in two entirely different economies, at least according to a new study by the Federal Reserve, which, ironically enough, made it happen. Article said it, not me. But hey, mark me down as agree. 10 out of 10, would not recommend.
Yes.
Would not recommend.
No.
So yeah, a lot of this is at the hands of the Fed. They don't want to take responsibility for this. I have no problem laying this down at the feet of the decisions of the Fed. So this chart here we have, it says financial distress among non-elderly adults by housing tenure. And on the left side of the chart, it says financially insecure, with only 24% of the people saying they're financially insecure are homeowners, and 46% of renters are saying they're financially insecure. Let me repeat that. 24% of homeowners say they're financially insecure, and 46% of renters saying they're financially insecure. Now, Brian, is this true from your perspective and your seat in the table?
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Or is it just the chart saying that?
So, I mean, I'll give you an example. When one of my clients needed to pay off debt because, they just completely had to take out expenses and, things happen. If they had not had their house to be able to tap into that equity, it would have been very difficult for them to get out of that rut.
You're talking about personal debt?
Yeah, personal debt, yeah. Right?
What was it? Give me the context. What kind of personal debt were we talking about here?
It's like student loans, credit card debt.
So student loans that weren't paid off by the government?
Exactly.
Okay.
Student loans,
sucks.
credit card debt, and just basically personal loans that they took out and accumulated.
Okay.
So I see that if you're a renter and you hit a financial crisis or, a financial obstacle, you better have savings, or you should have some sort of, fund where you can, use that money for a rainy day. Now, same thing if you're a homeowner, should have a savings. But let's say you don't and something happens. You have your house to leverage as an asset to say, hey, I know I don't want to, but I could tap into my equity to take the money out needed, and, I will be okay. Or I could sell the house and call it a day and I will be okay. So you have that security blanket per se to be able to hold on to if you need it for a rainy day. Now if you're a renter, you better have that security blanket in another way, or if you don't have it, you really just don't have any options, so you're gonna have to resort to a different type of solution. So with your house, I could see why you have a lot more confidence, a lot more security, because that thing you could put it up on the market and sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on how much you owe.
Yeah, I mean, and I get that, but then also if you can't go right back into being a homeowner again, you're talking about and then putting yourself back into a position where you're renting. Now that may be temporary, but what your argument here is saying, look, these people had a lot of debt that they personally had acquired. They needed to pay it off. The house was basically the problem solver in this case, where they were able to use and leverage the house's equity in order to pay off their debt, right? Now, remember last week though, we talked about how this is a survey of financial insecurity. Last week, remember, we kind of introduced the term, at least new for our show, was shelter insecurity, where people I don't know, because we're talking about, remember the generations, what are their top voting topics by generation, housing, and one of them was, one of the main things we talked about was housing, and the other one was economics. And so the housing and economics go hand in hand for us here at the show. Like, we talk about this a lot, and all the things we discuss could basically be categorized in one or two or both those categories kind of all the time. Now, this whole financial insecurity thing being so vastly different between homeowners and renters, I think is because of what you're talking about. Is that, okay, well, if I have to sell my house, I can. Or if I have to refinance my house to save some money, I can. Or if I got to take some cash out to pay off some debt, I can. If I got to get a home equity line of credit to cure whatever this problem is over here, I can. And, you just don't have those opportunities as a renter. And that can also then lead to this sentiment where they feel broadly more financially insecure than homeowners do.
And I was just hearing this morning, from 2019 to now, rents have gone up 70%.
Yeah.
And I was letting that kind of digest in my mind, and I'm like, that's insane.
That's insane.
Like you literally almost 100% of your rent, And it dawns on me like, okay, what if you don't have that extra money? Now you have to move elsewhere. You have to adjust your lifestyle. You have to, really kind of go back to the drawing board, see what you're going to do. Some people have to leave the state.
Yeah.
And that's horrible because you have no control over that.
Right.
Like things just go up. Your wages don't go up to meet that difference. And it sucks because that bill, that amount is due every month, regardless if your income is up or not. So
yeah. Well, and that's actually evidenced in part of this article too, is because they're talking about housing costs climbing during the pandemic while renters' income stagnated. And the difference in the disparity here is that median rent, at least in this measurement adjusted for inflation, was 17.9%. I know the number you're talking about from the 70 number, but this is from all the way back in like 2001. Okay, but the median renter household income overlap is 3.2%. So there's a massive gap between median rent running way out ahead of median renter household income. Now, again, these are medians. So there's a lot of people that are totally fine renting and have a lot of extra money.
Yeah.
And they have discretionary income.
Yeah.
And there's people that we know that own homes that are honestly financially
tight
in a bad spot. So it's not that it's only one way or only the other. There's always a mix. But in this chart here, it's evidencing one of the core problems, which is people are running from behind, trying to chase it down, and they're unable to get it broadly.
And that's what one of the biggest things that came out of all of this is that regardless of what's happening in the world, we care about this. This is our biggest problem. And until we're able to figure this out, I mean, people are just going to struggle and continue to have to figure out alternative ways to be able to come up with that difference because it's just not making sense anymore. Well,
and the next survey that they did here is the Gallup poll, which is Americans' outlook for the economy. And only 30% as of January of 2024 are saying 30% look like it's getting better, and 63% are saying it's getting worse. Now, the peak for people saying it was getting worse looks like it was back in like spring, summer of 2022, right when the Fed started like raising rates. So I'd say that looks like about 85% of people said that then.
This is pretty straight on because there's not much has happened drastically since then, and we've just been kind of like cruising this.
What do you mean nothing happened since then? What's wrong with you?
Well, no, not in a sense.
I'm just kidding. I'm just jabbing you, dude.
Not in a sense like drastically, like rates have been going up since then, but at that point. We reached November of last year, the worst time for rates. Right. And then since then, we've kind of leveled down.
Yeah.
But, we've been pretty, and I think that's pretty steady on the feeling for the economy.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think things are going to get better just yet. There still has to be a little bit more of,
yes, I agree with you.
But
one of the arguments, and we've talked about this on the show too, when it comes to inflation and comes to consumer prices and all that, like one of the potential challenges is that prices for consumer goods are able to be upheld by the people who have the let's say the equity, not just equity in their house, but they have they have cash flow every month, so they have discretionary income. They can still go on vacation. They can go out to the movies. They can go to the expensive, sports ball game that you got to pay $500 for a ticket to. That's not a shared experience for most of Americans right now. And I think that's why you see this number the way it is.
Oh, 100%.
You see a lot of people saying it's getting, basically 2/3 saying it's getting worse, 1/3 saying it's getting better.
And it sucks because it depends on your situation. Some people are probably like, hey, this is probably the best time that I've ever been at. Like, I'm doing very well. And other people are like, yo, like, the worst times, horrible situation. And there's no, how do I say? It's either you're doing fairly well or you're somewhat in a struggle.
Well, yeah. It's almost
there's
like
no middle ground.
It's getting gooder for the people who are in the good, and it's getting worse for the people who are already in the worst. And some of the things that were talked about here in the article is it has to do with all the refinancing we did. I mean, we kind of make the joke we refinanced half the planet in 2020 and 2021, but I mean, those were back to back the most amount of mortgage volume funded ever in those 2 years concurrently.
And you think about the people that make, smart financial decisions that are organized, a lot of that money that was cheap back then, they utilized that to only profit more, to only set themselves up more. And now the people that took that money and strategically used it to their benefit, right now they're good because they said, hey, I leveraged the Fed. Thank you so much. I took this, put it over here, and now it's very fruitful for me.
VA mortgage rates in the 2s.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, conventional loans in the 2s and the 3s. I mean, dude, the refinancing think about it created a ton of cash.
Those people that just completely tank their payments and they have literally $600,000-$700,000 house and their payment is sub $3,000 or sub $4,000. It's like you're your payment, you saved yourself so much more money that you could use to do other things.
That's what I'm saying. It
Like,
creates it creates gaps. Not like gap spending. That's that someone's going to go. That's not what gap spending is. It creates more margin in your monthly budget. So if your income is your monthly salary income is the same every single month, but you've reduced the cost of your housing payment, you've clawed back $500 or $1,000 a month to do whatever you want. Pay down debt if you want to do that. If you had debt, or discretionarily spend it if you want, or just deal and pad yourself with the inflation that everyone's paying at the price at the register.
Yep.
So in that example, given the set of those circumstances, knowing that for back-to-back years we did the most refinancing as an industry ever, and then at the same time that gave people the lowest payments ever with the lowest rates ever, then it makes sense that there are still a good section of the surveyors saying, yeah, things are great. Doesn't bother me at all. And then it also makes sense that the other side is like, oh, this is terrible. I'm playing catch up. I can't catch up. I'm out of breath. My legs are tired, and that thing's running way ahead of me. I don't know if I'm going to catch it. Yeah. And I get that. I totally get that. So
completely two different worlds.
Right. So I'm going to read like straight for this because I want this to come across. If you are not a Zero Hedge reader, here's a taste. It's a whole other world for homeowners who overwhelmingly refinanced during the pandemic at average rates around 3%, taking hundreds of thousands out of their Fed-pumped homes. They plowed a good chunk of that money into stocks, which also soared thanks to the Fed's near-zero interest rates, the so-called everything bubble, courtesy of the Fed. That means homeowners actually saved money compared with pre-pandemic. They had a larger mortgage, sure, but at 3%, the Fed actually lowered their monthly nut. Exactly what we're talking about right now. How many times do we see this? Now, for the people who own a home and who are able to do that, I'll say they're sitting pretty as an easy way to kind of summarize the general consensus. They're sitting pretty. They have lots of choices. Even our friends that are moving out of state, they had a VA loan that their payments really low, and their home equity is high, and they're going to walk out with hundreds of thousands of dollars and move out of California. And that's because they refinanced at a ultra low rate back in the pandemic days. Their payment was low, and because prices came back up or stayed and then kind of nudged back up again, now they're going to be able to sell at the new top with a low rate and take all their equity and go buy in the new state they're going to, which I won't mention. So
Texas.
What? How'd you know that?
Was it the friend you were looking for, that 77 acres?
Wait, what? Those stories are connected together? Yeah.
Well, I pay attention.
Actually trying to figure out how to help him get that house. I think that would be a super dope deal.
Oh, that sounds like an awesome. No, it sounds awesome. Trust me.
76 acres sounds like there's room for good old Uncle Andy over there at the ranch.
So I've seen a lot of people move towards the idea of building compounds where they just buy a huge area and put multiple parcels in there. Mm-hmm. I honestly think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's like
smart. For a long time, that's how homes and legacies got passed on. Is that the family had like a big piece of land and they just they built other homes or other structures, and then it just became something that got passed down. I mean, there's people here in East County and San Diego that I know who every time the land connected to theirs came up for sale, they just bought it. And they didn't even put anything. They just bought it. So they completely encircled themselves and their main house and their main area, which also has 2 other homes on it already.
That was badass.
So it's a main home, 2 other homes, and then they just bought the land around it. Now they completely insulated themselves from basically neighbors.
Yeah.
Not to double middle finger them. They're just thinking, look, we have this nice retreat for ourselves and for our family, and there's 3 structures on it. And that they've done this over the course of 22 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't, I'm just going to gobble up everything. Some billionaire, flew into town and just bought it all. But it was just, that other 20 acres is available. Let's buy it. The next 40 acres is available. Let's buy it. And somehow, and in part to what your point was earlier, where the house is the leverage for doing the thing you want to do, that was some of the case. They owned real estate, owned properties, had lots of investment and rentals, plus had a place that was generating enough equity that it could be used to go buy the places in the surrounding area. When they came up, it ended up affording them to be able to do all those things. Isn't that crazy?
Such a chess play.
Yeah. Let's close out with this last one from Realtor.com. The number of U.S. homes for sale is slowly returning to normal, an incredible trend, and economists say. Now, we kind of had, dipped our toe into this topic in a previous episode where we were talking about, despite the amount of increase in inventory, pending home sales were down month to month. Remember that? So we had pending home sales down 7.7% recently. But that's also within the same window of space that this article is saying that inventory is returning. And in fact, inventory is quote unquote booming. So So in the latest monthly housing report from Realtor.com, the overall number of homes for sale in May marks 7 months of growth in a row. There are 35.2% more homes on the market than this time last year.
That's insane.
An incredible trend in the direction of normality. So remember that we talked about how pending home sales were down and that inventory was up. This is either going to go out one of two ways. Either demand will show up and absorb all this new inventory, or the demand will be waning and we will start to see price corrections, and that pending home sales will still be down or low, and you actually might start seeing some price retreat in selective parts of the country. What do you think?
So I was going to similarly agree with that, only to the point where it starts heating up again, and then it's going to go right back to
what's going to heat it up?
So the demand.
Okay.
So if the demand fits, and once it gets there, I think enough people still want to buy the house. And even if the prices go down, more people are going to start jumping on the boat. And like we said, there's certain people that like this appetite, that are okay with these levels. But as soon as people start tapering down, there's more people that are going to jump like, hey, now it's time. And that by default, there's going to be a certain period where it drops. And then, okay, that was the bottom. Now we're coming right back up.
So I think this is a little bit of projecting, and I'm not saying they're doing this intentionally. I think this is kind of just happening. This is my way of describing what I'm reading here. I'm gonna just say, quote, while the housing market is still in the seller's territory, it is expected to shift in a buyer-friendly direction as mortgage rates resume their decline over the next year and the number of homes for sale increases. So I think that demand drive you're talking about is going to come from basically the signal of the Fed that they're going to have to reduce rates sometime in the fall. They're kind of saying it, not saying it.
Yeah, the tottering around.
But this is that kind of projecting where it's like, oh, hey, it would be really nice if you started dropping those rates in the fall there, guy. And then all of a sudden, okay, they're going to do that. Then it's also, again, we've talked about it during election time.
Yep.
There's a lot of other variables going on.
It's like a perfect storm that they're brewing and holding off on to really just kind of be able to leverage everything at once.
So if that's the case, it's like, okay, well then maybe sellers need to hold their breath for another 60 or 90 days.
Yeah,
because
I can see that.
It's this battle. Okay, so the spring and summer, it's home buying season. Like this is the time to put your house in the market. Well, that's what you see happening here. 35.2% more inventory hitting the market now than this time last year. Okay, evidence of that. But if you're also strategically claiming that with rates going down, it could create more demand, and the demand, and we know the demand is going to keep prices high, then maybe holding your breath for 2 or 3 more months could get you a higher price. It would be out of season, quote unquote, by going into the fall. In some places in the country, you really have to consider that when it comes to weather and actually how well your house might sell in that time. But if you have a choice, I mean, I think you're teetering or teeter-tottering or wagering between two really optimal, I say historically, recently optimal situations. Get your house on the market right now while it's buying season, selling season, or wait till that Fed makes that like dip in rates and they make their first announcement that they're going to drop rates. I think that's when demand and affordability are going to get a little bit closer together, and then you're probably still going to be able to get peak price at that time. I just don't see peak price going away.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's really difficult to pinpoint how far prices are going to tank. I don't think they'll tank. They'll dip.
But they kind of did that. They kind of already did that in the summer of 23. They hit a little hitch, but they came back already. So it's like we're already back to where it was before that.
And that's where I'm like, saying that it's going to happen again.
It's kind of like a little fish hook.
Yeah,
like kind of
and every year. Okay. Because I think if rates come down at the same time that, prices start to come down, I think it's going to be like, boom.
But they won't. I'm saying I don't think they will, because if rates end up coming down, that's not going to drop prices down too. You disagree?
I agree.
You agree?
I agree.
Oh, okay.
It's going to make prices go up because more people are going to be able to afford.
It's at least going to hold the price, because now the cost of borrowing the money to get that price is going to be leveled out.
Rates would need to stay higher for longer. But
hey, where'd you hear that term?
Hey, I've been paying attention to the Fed. You guys should check us out every week.
Higher for longer. That's a great marketing slogan for some other businesses that are cropping up these days. I said higher for longer and cropping in the same sentence. You all know what I'm talking about. So there are 46.6 more homes on the market in the $200,000 to $350,000 range, something inventory and price-constrained buyers will surely welcome. My question mark is to where are these places? I'll take 2.
That's equivalent to $650 to $750 here in San Diego.
Yeah, it really is. Because if the national median home price is like $442, and we're saying San Diego median home price is $1,072,000.
Our median price is going to be around that price.
You're right around $650 to $750 for locally price adjusted inventory coming to the market in that range.
That for San Diego, as soon as houses in that range start to come down a little bit, I have buyers that are in that range. Right away, they're freaking sending houses. Right away, hey, this one came down. So there's people at
$650, $750?
That $650 to $750, $800 range is, I feel, the medium price range for a lot of people that are doing their second home, their starter home. Like, that's the healthy medium where people are at. And I feel that that's where a lot of the competition is. You start going above $850 to $900, things start to slow down a little bit unless you have the high income. The payments are pretty significant once you start coming in with just the minimum. So a lot of the people that I see buying in those ranges are coming in with a hefty down payment or equity that's, being transferred.
I'll tell you something. I've seen that inventory in the higher priced homes has definitely tapered off. It's in the other direction. There's less homes coming out for $1.5 million, $2 million, $3 million.
It's just tough.
That's what I'm saying. There's a much smaller buyer pool that's in some cases, and maybe most cases, it's also a buyer who's coming from a place that they're also trying to sell at, let's say it's a localized highest price as well. And I know that we've seen some price declines, but then even despite the price declines, they end up going off market. I've seen a handful of those happen just here in our local area in the last, I'd say, more than the last 30 days for sure. It wasn't a lot in February, March, but in April, May, it kind of caught my eye in April. And then in May, I was like, oh, wow, all these are gone. And I thought they closed. They didn't close. They actually are off the market. They're not even for sale anymore.
It just starts getting very tricky with the payments. Like, even if you make tons of money, like, it's still a fat payment that you're going to be paying a month for. Anything above $900,000, you're in the hole for like 6, 7, maybe
$8,000,
depending on your down payment. So if you
that sounds so crazy. We're just throwing these numbers out.
And I know, and it sucks to say that we just talk about it so loosely because that's our norm and reality here in San Diego. Yeah. But truth of the matter is that for anyone, that's significant amounts of money going out every month, and
it's a lot of money.
Regardless of where you live or what you do, you're gonna double think those types of payments.
I can find lots of things to do with $8,000 a month.
Like, financially speaking, like, if you're somebody that takes care of your finances, you're probably, hey, this isn't a good financial move. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of like I feel that smart enough people would be like, hey, I can taper off this right now. I don't have to go into this right now. I could go into a smarter financial thing a more smarter financial asset or investment than, get into this.
Yeah. So let's use a really quick case study. There's some people in my circle who I've been talking to about, okay, if you come back to California, how much is it going to cost you to own a house? Let's say it's $8,000 a month. $1 million house, $8,000 a month. Okay, if you rent a house that's a little bit smaller and you have to rent it and it's still $5,000 a month, you're basically, quote unquote, saving $3,000 a month, which it sounds crazy. If you actually are budgeted for $8,000 out of pocket, then you can split it the way you're talking about. You can rent for $5,000, and it feels like trashing $5,000 every month, right? But that $3,000 can be going to something else. Savings, it could be going to investment, it could be doing whatever. Now, I know that is an active conversation with people who are well off economically and are trying to figure out, well, where am I going to go put this hard-earned dollar?
Because, you think about it, it's not a bad play if you're renting for, a certain, plan that you have going on. Like, hey, I know we're gonna not buy a house right now, but we're gonna take those savings and put them towards something else. Like, that's a smart decision if you have that planned out. But it's very difficult if you don't have that plan. So I think if you're able to, put that into place, you'll be able to, maneuver a lot better. But it's just.
No, I know what you're saying, because it's like it's a catch-22.
It's like, on one side, I'm not paying this over here to pay over there, but you're not getting this that you would get for buying. But in your current situation, that may not make sense for you to take those write-offs. Yeah. You probably need the cash flow a lot more, and that can make you a little bit more money if you're smart with it.
It's a tangle, because at some point you have to decide, and I'm going to just locally speak here for San Diego. It's like at some point you have to decide that, okay, well, that $1 million house is not in my definition a $1 million house. It's a $500,000 house.
Yeah.
But you know what? It costs $1 million. And if I truly believe that over the long haul, 10 years, 15 years, it's going to be $1.5 million, $2 million. It may not even look like a $2 million house, but right now and later, two different scenarios, man. They're just two different things.
Yeah.
So at some point, someone might have bought that house for $250,000. Like, this ain't a $250,000 house. And then it was $500,000. Like, I sold my house for $500,000. And you're like, man, that's not a $500,000 house. That's $1 million. Whoa, that's $1 million house.
I think you said it, you have to believe. Like you
And
have to
commitment,
believe
and have a commitment.
Have a believe, back it up with some good, comps, information, and I think that's it. You just have to believe that what you're doing is going to pay out. And I mean, I don't know how much data you need to show that.
Well, and it takes us down the whole
investments,
that could take us all the way down that whole the house hacking rabbit hole we've talked about as far as how you can leverage property and make more income and have cash flow and all that kind of stuff. But
Yes,
I
sir.
think in general, if you're like, hey, I'm just trying to chomp down $8,000 a month payment for a house that I just got to live in with my family, you're making a big choice.
Yeah.
You're making a very hefty commitment. So, Brian, tell me, what was your favorite part of the show today?
37% more inventory in the market compared to last year.
That's really good. Yeah. I really like that.
More houses.
I don't often. God, I don't know. Okay, I have a toss up, and maybe you can help me decide what my favorite part of the show is today. I like that I like the way Zero Hedge framed the Federal Reserve's position of their responsibility for kind of why the haves and the have-nots are the haves and the have-nots. But I also really enjoyed our conversation about the investor home purchases, and the fact that it did not include mom and pop buyers, I think is actually masking what percentage of our real estate is actually owned by someone other than the occupants. So that one was very fascinating for me too. So you can pick. Those are two. They're a tie for me.
I'll make it easy. We're going to go with both this week. I'll let you have both. That's
so
good.
Non-answer from Brian to the right. Well, thanks again for another great show, Brian. Thank you all for watching the Mortgage Heroes podcast. We appreciate you joining us every single week for some love. I was going to say some lively conversations.
Some lovely conversations.
Lovely conversations. No, some
here at
lively
Mortgage
conversations.
Heroes, we just love to talk about economy.
I was going to say we love interacting with you guys in the comments, so that's cool. Even if you dislike some of the things we're saying, I've actually learned a couple new perspectives, which has been helpful.
Nice.
And also been able to share some context in some others, so that's been very helpful as well. So thanks for tuning into the show. If you have not yet checked out our playlist called Friends of Mortgage Heroes, myself, Brian, and Will interview our friends in and around real estate, talk about success and failures and how you can win in mortgage and real estate for yourself and your family and for your personal family legacy.
Let's go.
So check that out. We always have great guests that come on that represent a lot of different segments of real estate, and we've had some fascinating guests so far and some really interesting ones coming up. So thank you all for tuning in. We will check you out again next week.
Later, guys.